Hiya! Welcome to LSB Feasters Radio Channel, where we keep great radio from the past alive. Today, we are going to Boston and the Dean of Talk Radio. I'm talking about Jerry Williams. Jerry spent most of his life on the radio doing talk radio, rabble-rousing, and just pretty much stirring the pot. Jerry came to Boston from WIBG in Philadelphia in the late 1950s to go to work at WMEX. He spent many years there until he got the call to go to Chicago. And he went to WBBM, where he did talk radio for a short period till the station flipped format to all news. He went back to Boston and then spent many years on WBZ. After he left WBZ, he had to deal with a non-compete, so he spent some time in Hartford and Philadelphia, but he came back to Boston and he spent many years on WRKO. Jerry was really good at what he did, and I'm telling you, he did not mind stirring things up one bit. If you haven't heard the Dean of Talk Radio, check him out. It's Jerry Williams on WBZ Boston.
Those delicate things labeled hand wash only. Look for it in the Westinghouse automatic washer. Just lift off the regular agitator, and there it is. A smaller agitator that will gently machine wash all those things you used to wash by hand. Makes hand wash only labels practically obsolete. I'm Frank Gifford, asking you to compare the Westinghouse washer with any other washer. And while you're at it, be sure to check the way to save lid. Only Westinghouse has it. Put your wash load on the way to save lid, and you're shown exactly how much water and detergent to use. You save on water and detergent and get a better wash. Ask your Westinghouse dealer for a demonstration and compare. You'll buy Westinghouse, the Westinghouse automatic washer with the hand wash agitator. You can be sure if it's Westinghouse.
New shields will prevent motorists and passers-by from being distracted by X-rated films shown at Boston's 3 drive-ins. The theaters, all owned by the Redstone chain, will voluntarily put up the shields, even though an attorney for the firm argued that a proposed city ordinance that would require the shields is patently faulty. Attorney Louis Werner asked the City Council today, does the Council have an ordinance that anyone undressing must pull down the shade? The proposal, under consideration by the Council, would impose a $50 fine for offenders. A birthday cake, this one with 74 candles, will be rolled out in Rome this weekend. We'll look at the upcoming event through the eyes of Group W commentator Rod McLeish.
This weekend, Pope Paul VI celebrates his 74th birthday. And next Thursday, a month-long Synod of Roman Catholic bishops convenes in Rome to consider all over again those fearful issues which have rent the Church before the eyes of the world: birth control, papal infallibility, and the celibacy of the priesthood. As the London Economist remarked recently, not since the Reformation has the Roman Catholic Church been in such turmoil and indecision. It is not for non-Catholics to make judgments, nor should we choose sides in those things of deep concern to the unique Roman Catholic community. Yet a few observations about the agony of Catholicism are inescapable. The tension is the tension of honorable opposites, tradition versus the new humanism, and there are no venal men involved in the massive debates. There's an added sorrow to all of this as well. Some people, some of them church historians, believe that Protestantism is approaching a watershed moment in the evolving history of theology. Dynamic new ideas are coming forward in that most basic field of inquiry, man's relationship to God, his perceptions of God. Against the drama of that sort of convulsion, the Roman Catholic Church appears to be engaged in a crisis of authority instead of the more joyous crisis of theology. That there is a crisis of authority, no one can deny. Last April, the National Opinion Poll published the results of a questionnaire put to 6,000 priests, bishops, and ex-priests. More than half of them said they felt that priests should be permitted to marry. This is directly contrary to the opinion of Rome and the Curia, where Pope Paul compared priests who leave the church to marry with Judas Iscariot. The lines of disagreement are drawn tightly. The differences appear irreconcilable. It's a painful thing to watch. Next year, Paul VI will turn 75. He will reach the age when, by his own decree, bishops should submit their resignations. One wonders if he will follow his own rule and resign from what surely must be now the misery of the papacy. No viable successor appears in the layman's field of vision. Perhaps there isn't one who could reconcile the surge of humanism against the wall of tradition. A new constitution of sorts for the Church will be studied at next month's synod. It's upon those deliberations, presumably, that hope must now be focused. This is Rod McLeish in Washington.
The weather for Boston and vicinity tonight, clear and cooler. The lows will be in the 40s, except near 50 along the coast, diminishing northerly winds becoming about 10 miles an hour by morning. Saturday, sunny and mild. The high 65 to 70 degrees with gentle northerly winds. Saturday night, clear and continued cool. The temperatures 45 to 50 degrees. On Sunday, mostly sunny. The highs near 70. Right now in Boston, 53 degrees. And that's the 9 o'clock WBZ report with portions recorded. I'm Maurice Lewis for WBZ News, and now, once again, it's back to Jerry Williams and his special guests.
254-5678. Hello, America. Welcome back. It's the second hour of our final day celebrating WBZ's 50th anniversary. Most of the crew is back from Springfield. Carl is
on
back
hands and knees,
full of pizza and grinders up to here. And we're celebrating in this hour with Streeter Stewart, Jerry Howard, who popped in.
Slim
Guy,
Pickens.
right? Carl DeSuze, Arch McDonald, Art Gardner, and Horace Ruff, who's been at WBZ for 34 years, by the way. I think, Arch, however, you beat him in terms of how long ago you started here. Am I
Yeah,
right?
I think so, by about a half a year.
Just a half a year, is that
I
all?
think so.
Uh-huh. And a little later on, we'll be talking to Mel Allen, Robert Q. Lewis, Charles Correll of the famous Amos and Andy team, Bob and Ray, of course, who were at WHDH some years ago. Streeter, who's sitting next to you? Maybe you can tell us, give him the appropriate introduction.
Yes, I can. His real name is Jerry Howarth, but he calls himself Howard. And that's not all he calls himself. He calls himself all kinds of names. Among them is Slim Pickens, and a lot of people call him other names besides that, but I'm not going to tell about that.
No, but you've heard of a few, I'm sure.
Yes, I've heard of a few, and he used to be on all night long with Sky.
Right.
Jerry and Sky.
And there was the Jerry and Sky
Was that on
team.
WEI, Jerry?
No, it was on here, too.
WBZ.
Yeah.
Right.
That since has been translated into Larry Glick and Streeter Stewart.
Well, I had to keep Carl awake when he was on the road nights, you know.
That's right. When I was out lecturing, I would be tuned in to stay awake, and I'd be chuckling myself into the ditches with you.
Well, I can tell you who kept him awake and alive, and that was Rose and Ruby of the old mill out in Chelmsford. They would come in with cakes and pies and pastries, and there was a fellow came up
The
from,
morning show never
the
gets
south
this
with
stuff.
ice cream. Who was that?
Oh, that was from A.R. Parker's down in Bridgewater.
Right,
East
and
Bridgewater.
boy, the spreads these fellows had.
Mr.
Man,
Caldemore.
Caldemore. He's
Right.
with the bank now on the south
That's
shore.
right, in Quincy. Right.
See, if you get into ice cream business, it's only a step to the bank.
Oh, they were great to us, though. We did eat high on the hog.
But Jerry would take all these different parts. He was not only Slim Pickens, but I'm not going to tell the rest of it because after being over in Worcester one day lecturing and having somebody ask me about Larry Glick and Streeter Glick, I'm not even going to try to unravel the Jerry Howard and the Slim Pickens and all the rest of these voices.
I remember Art Gardner coming in one morning. I think it was a Sunday, Art, when a bad rainstorm and your car had broken down. You relieved me that morning, and I went up and got your car and tried to get it started. I think I did. I don't recall. But you got home all right.
Yeah, I made it home. He spit in the gas tank, and that got it going.
And I heard you speaking a little earlier, too, about late Chick Morris. Chick used to
Colton
relieve
Morris.
me mornings. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also Vern Williams, too, occasionally.
That's right. Who was out in California now.
Right.
Jerry, when did you begin at BZ? How long
It was
ago
the
that?
early 50s, Jerry. I don't know,
preceding
around
that?
52. And before that, I was working on the Mutual Network and also upstate New York. And I went from BZ to EEI, then down to Quincy. I've been there going on 11 years.
You know, I really don't realize how that time has flown the last 11 years, because I remember you as being associated with EEI when I got here in 57 in Boston. And I didn't realize that you had been in Quincy for all that time.
Yeah, almost be 11 years, going on 11.
Yeah, well, anybody who stays in Quincy for 11 years has got to have courage.
I've lived in Quincy for over 20.
Well, that is a man of great courage, guts, and stamina with the strong accent.
Guys coming.
Well, a lot of some of our other people, Nelson Bragg went to Quincy.
Yes.
Big Bob Risling.
Yeah.
By the way, Nelson wanted to be here tonight, but he's in Europe.
Right.
Yeah, he's in Europe. He flew out yesterday on a
What's he
little
doing in
trip.
Europe?
Well, he's going to be gone until the 9th of October on a...
Well, he heard about those reduced fares, $135 round trip.
No, he heard about the Oktoberfest.
Jerry, who are some of the people you knew and worked with?
Well, every one of these gentlemen.
He was going to say characters.
Some of the other people at EEI, some of the old-timers over there.
Well, of course, Howard Nelson is still there.
Yeah.
And he
Carl
and I are
Moore.
good friends, and the late Carl Moore.
Carl Moore was a veteran of how many years at EEI?
Oh, I don't know, but
He was over here, too, for quite a while.
for years.
Yeah, he used to work with Malcolm McCormick, Mac and Moore.
Mac.
Because I worked with them. They were on the mornings.
And Ray Gerardin, you remember
Ray
Carl and Ray, yes.
And,
Were
Ken
those
Oldham.
the days of live?
Oh, everything was live.
Yeah.
Everything. We did very
Pulsating.
little. Very little. Matter of fact, this back in the days when we had Rakoff and the orchestra, the band here.
Oh, I've
and
had,
about 5 or 6 programs a day.
Yeah, by the way, those people at CBS in Chicago are still on the payroll. The band people, they just show up and get their $250 every week.
Well, when there's a Caesar still working, living out there, why, that makes a difference.
We've had many cow milking contests, Carl Moore and myself, as out on the Boston Common as pickums every year for
That's
the Dairy
right.
Festival.
Yeah. We all were involved with that. You remember?
Yeah.
Oh, indeed, yeah. I heard you just before I came in here talking about the escapade at the corner of Boylston. Yeah, I was the timekeeper, and I cut that from 5 minutes to 1 minute, as you may not remember. But we had all just gotten out of the service, so I took a quarter out of my pocket and bounced it on the thing, and came to the conclusion that he flunked. And it was just we gave him a minute, and a short minute at that. He didn't have a chance.
Arch, were you always doing news here at BZ?
No, as a matter of fact, I started when I first came to Boston. I came down here to do the Boston Symphony.
Were you ever confused with another Arch McDonald?
Yes, I was, because he was doing sports, and I did some sports with quite a bit of, matter of fact, quite a few sports
All
with
the
Bill
track
Stern.
stuff, yeah.
And there was another Archie MacDonald too. This was an Archie MacDonald who was with the Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals.
That's right, the SPCA.
Yes,
That's right, I forgot about that.
I think
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
sure that he's living, but
Yeah, that was many years ago. But no, I came down originally to do I came up really from Providence, right out of Providence College, to do the Boston Symphony with Dr. Kuzovitsky.
Mm-hmm. Is there one outstanding event in the last 34 odd years?
No, not outstanding, because there were so many. They all telescoped. There were so many people, really.
Did anybody ever undress you in the studio as Ben Gross described?
This was not uncommon back in those. Yes, as a matter of fact, I remember I was doing the news one night, doing the news in the Bradford in Studio B, and and there was a guy by the let's see, who was it? Art Feldman? Art Feldman. You guys remember him at all?
Oh yeah.
He went on. As a matter of fact, he became one of the top boys for the NBC Blue in London, and then he did he was the pool reporter with MacArthur going into the Philippines. Yeah. But I was doing a newscast one night, and there was a commercial that we had for, I don't know, some women's underwear or some blasted thing, and they started doing this round the rosy thing on me and trying to break me up, and I didn't really break very easily, so they decided to undress me. Well, this was pretty rough, because actually we had big windows, and the Hotel Bradford had a lot of people, and they actually opened my belt, and I was standing with my trousers around my ankles doing the news. And all the women looking goggle-eyed into the window.
DeSouza, you were undressed like that one time, too, as I recall it in Studio B. No, he tries not to remember, but I can recall him standing there, too.
I wasn't conscious when it was happening. How about that?
I can remember a few other times when you weren't
that
conscious.
happened on a few occasions when they tried to break you. That was the final resort. When they couldn't break, they'd finally resort to that.
Yeah, there was great pride we all took in not being able to be broken while announcing, and the standard gag with anybody was to see just how far you could go before they would crack. There was one marvelous way we could always make Streeter crack, just by walking by the window slowly.
Now, I want to explain that. Because there was there was a history to this, and the history was this.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute now. We'll get that explanation in a moment, but first, I want people to stay, see? Through this, you've undoubtedly heard of the unique life insurance plan offered by Life of America Insurance Corporation of Boston. No refusal life insurance for those between 55 and 87 years of age, which includes everybody here. The plan has been so successful that Life of America is now extending the same benefits to those at the age of 46. Now anyone between the age of 46 and 87 can obtain the same coverage for as little as $6.95 a month. No physical exam regardless of your past medical history. No salesman will call. It's entirely up to you. After receiving and reading your policy, if you decide it's not all you thought it would be, return it within 30 days and your full premium will be refunded. Interested? Well, you should be. Write to Insurance, WBZ Boston 02134, or call 423-3360. Get the information. That's Insurance, WBZ Boston 02134, or call 423-3360. Please don't forget to include your birthday.
Hi, I'm BZ's Guy Manila. Aerosol insecticides kill bugs, but WBZ urges you to keep these agents out of the reach of children. It's a matter of life and breath, says your Respiratory Disease Association.
Flair right smooth.
Flair is tough.
Flair, 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 Flair. Smooth, Flair right smooth.
Flair is tough.
Get into show business with Flair, the pen that shows exactly how you feel. Because Flair comes filled with more than ink. Flair comes filled with love, joy, happiness, fun. Old-fashioned pens write words. Flair writes feelings. Flair, now playing at your favorite store with a cast of 12 emotionally involved colors.
Ooh, Flair writes smooth.
Flair is tough.
Flair, Flair, Flair. With the smooth,
tough,
nylon point, it's the only way to write. Flair, Flair, Flair.
It's BZ's 50th anniversary. Streeter Stewart is here. Jerry Howard, Carl DeSouza, Arch McDonald, Art Gardner, Horace Rolfe. Upcoming, Mel Allen, Robert Q. Lewis, Charles Correll, and Bob and Ray, and others. And now back to the explanation about why Streeter Stewart could break up when people just walked by the studio.
At the Hotel Bradford on the 5th floor, we had 2 studios. They took up the entire side of the hotel. There was a big glass out to the hall, and each of these panes of glass was as big as the walls of these studios here. And in between holding these panes in place were giant pillars that were about 2 feet across. And Art Amadon used to start at the end of one of these panes of glass, and of course there was no stairway there, but Amadon would lower his body a little bit as he walked along, so that by the time he got to the last pillar, he was down in the basement. He would immediately, you couldn't see it behind the pillar, but he would turn around then, wave to you as he walked up. And by the time he got to the other end, he was once again up out of the basement. Well, he did that so often that all it took was for me to see Art Amadon start. I got to where I wouldn't even look at Art Amadon anymore, and I was afraid to look for fear it was Art Amadon, no matter who it was. He had a bag of tricks. Another thing he would do, it was really very monotonous, but he would put his hand out as if to shake hands with you. Then he would pull back the index finger and the middle finger, and as you grabbed his hand, he would say, "Shot off in the war." And you would get hold of this funny-feeling hand, and over he would do that. It got to where I couldn't see Art Amadon without wanting to laugh.
I'll tell you another... Go ahead, Iris. But I remember we had several funny incidents back in the good old days. Remember we had a studio about a third of the size of this studio, a table about half the size, and about 9 people around it between the big 6 and 7 spot. Bob Risling, the big Bob Risling, yes. His powerful voice. Leo Wiegand in sports. One of us would be doing the old SO newscast. And you remember, Streeter, you had such an analytical sense of humor. Streeter can look way into things, way beyond us. I had a spot I used to do, about 2 or 3 times a week, some local racetrack. And my tagline was, and no minors allowed. And Streeter would usually, get a few chuckles. And it got so I couldn't say any minors allowed because I said, Streeter, what's so funny in this tag I'm reading? Other things I can understand. He said, Art, I can just see those poor miners' grimy face with that lamp on, trying to get into the racetrack, and they won't let them in. I was sorry he asked because I couldn't do it anymore either.
Well, it got to be on a Sunday afternoon. We had a 1-minute electrical transcription, as we called them in those days, for Pepto-Bismol. And I was working with Carlton Ide on a Sunday afternoon. And at the end of this, they had a live tag that had to be read, and it said, in Canada, Pepto-Bismol was known as PB. Well, the more you heard that, the funnier it got. And we built up an awful hysterical tension so that no one could say that without simply breaking up and going all to pieces.
I think in those days also there was the feeling of having to do everything perfectly. It was a much more relaxed feeling.
Because everything was
radio today, if you make a boo-boo on news, so what?
Yes. So that when Carlton Ide tried to do that, I had to get clear out of the studio, clear off the floor. And, of course, when I did it, there couldn't be anyone else around either. There were so many things like that after a while you build up a lot of these background situations whereby just a little incident can touch off.
There's one lady that we haven't mentioned since I've been sitting here who really was a radio. And that was Marge Mills. And Carl,
the dean of all women broadcasters, and she was later given the official title of Dame Boston. And I know she's listening right now.
Bless her.
On Beacon Hill, and
she was a great gal, and
she still is
a great gal, and she, without any doubt, probably has had the biggest radio audience in the history of radio insofar as New England was concerned.
Marge Mills was on here as far back as 1929.
She had a great audience.
She began with the Medford Hillside station, which I talked about, broomstick antenna. They used to use that in those old days with crystal sets.
And just about everybody or anyone who ever came to New England.
And she, of course, is woman's page editor of the Boston Herald.
I think we ought to mention Mildred Carlson, too.
Yep. She was right there, too, with her home farm, and she was probably known through a good part of the country, too, because of her home economics, and she was really quite an authority. And she has now gone with the SPCA, and she is a vice president of the SPCA, as a matter of fact. And
that's the second time tonight the SPCA has come up. Which is strange enough.
Very doggy affair.
Why does the answer man evoke all sorts of...
Can I tell this story?
Yeah.
Well, speaking of people who couldn't break up, Bud Markle was one. Bud was with us for many years, and Arch McDonald. But I had terrible difficulties with the answer man. It was a package show, and we had questions like, does an Eskimo's nose turn green in the summer? But why is there more smallpox in Sydney, Australia?
Well, weren't those questions done in a particular style?
Oh, yeah.
To ask those questions?
Yes, yeah.
Would you give us,
like
just try to remember the style. I'd like to hear that.
Well, Mr. Answer Man, a listener in Chelsea would like to know why Eskimos get smallpox in the summertime. Well, Art, they don't. And, next question, please.
Next question.
But the answer man, he's off the air now, isn't he? Is it still a package show? I think so. But he'll be sitting there at night. Let's see, a listener in, let's put Chelsea. A listener in Agawam. And on we'd go. But Arch could sail through these things beautifully. And, Arch, why is it, I'd like to ask you today, why didn't you ever break up? You never, was it your concentration, or?
I don't know. No, as a matter of fact, it became a matter of a challenge with me.
Yeah.
And
it's a challenge
because when I first came to Boston, there were a number of people on the staff who were given to this and would sort of take it onto themselves to try to just about break up everybody. Matter of fact, really big names.
The late Mayor Curley break you up a little bit?
No, as a matter of fact, no.
No one's broken, aren't you?
No, but I'll tell you what did happen to me with Mayor Curley.
Michael.
Remember John Barry?
Yes.
Well, John Barry was at the Boston Globe, and I was sent down when I first came here to do the election returns out of the city room of the Boston Globe, and I was working with John Barry, who was a political editor of the Globe at the time. And it was my first exposure to Boston politics, and we were in the, actually, down on Washington Street, which was then Newspaper Row. And it was a mob scene on election night down there back in those days, very colorful. So he dropped a microphone out the window down 3 or 4 floors, and I got the go-ahead, my first exposure, and from John Barry. He said, take it away. And I started to talk, and all of a sudden, I heard this mellifluent voice. Young man, I'm James Michael Curley. That was my introduction, literally, to politics in Boston. And for about 3 minutes, I said nothing, just listened to the man until they cut him off the air up on the 3rd or 4th floor at the Boston Globe.
But Art, you said that Bud Markle never broke up, but I saw Bud Markle break up. Really? He was a serious-minded fellow, but he sometimes would break himself up because he could see humorous situations for others. I know I was reading the weather forecast one morning, and he had seen the weather forecast before I read it, and it was talking about broken ceilings, that is, the break in the clouds and so on. He got up on a chair in front of me and pretended that he was holding up the ceiling and tried to break me up. And then later on, he himself broke up.
Just thinking of the gag he had pulled on you.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly how it happened.
I'm going to break for a moment, and we're going to be talking shortly to Mel Allen by telephone. All these, would you please join me and ask Mel some questions, too? Streeter Stewart, Jerry Howard is here with Slim Pickens and Sky. Carl DeSouza, Arch McDonald, Art Gardner, Horace Rolfe, Shermfellas coming along with his money bags and his orchestra. And a few hundred of his Stan Kenton songs, and I'll be here as well, celebrating WBZ's 50th anniversary. Please stay with us. There's much to be said for doing your own thing. By specializing, you do a better job than the fellow who tries to do too many things. For nearly a century, the cooperative banks of Massachusetts have specialized in their thing. Home and family, thrift and financing, that's exactly why.
For mortgages and loans and savings too. The bank that backs the family is the bank for you.
Your cooperative bank.
Your cooperative bank. WBZ.
A new day, and it's all yours. Except for a few demands. Chores. And endless interruptions. If our days at Table Talk were like your days at home, we'd never get to bake such good pies. Luckily, our days are different. Nothing but flour, shortening, fresh fruit, the oven, and us. Table Talk. The kind of pie you'd bake if you had our kind of time.
WBZ, the Boston sound. 103 radio gets around. WBZ.
The spirit of New England, WBZ and WBZ-FM Boston Group W, Westinghouse Broadcasting. Listen, when it comes to driving in places that are rough, here we go talking about Carl's girl again, that are rough and rocky or soft and slippery, nothing beats a four-wheel drive vehicle. And when it comes to four-wheel drive, nothing beats a Jeep vehicle from Back Bay Motors. That's because these vehicles have Jeep guts with powerful engines and transmissions, tough bodies and frames, strong axles and suspensions. That goes for the Jeep Original, the classic four-wheel drive, multi-purpose vehicle for the sporty new Jeep Commander with the mightiest engines ever. Don't overlook the Jeep Wagoneer, the one that outsells all other four-wheel drive family wagons combined. And for good reasons. There's also the Jeep Truck that carries a big payload but not a big price. Come in to Back Bay Motors for the Jeep vehicle that's right for you. Back Bay Motors, 750 Commonwealth Avenue in Boston. Now, by telephone, on our celebrity line, one of the all-time greats of radio and television, one of my great favorites, one of the more colorful of the sports broadcasters, and, of course, that's what it's all about. When you listen to a guy, I'd rather hear more than just statistics, which we get a lot of today, the great Mel Allen. Mel?
Hi, Jerry.
Hi, how are you?
First rate, thank you.
Sound just great.
Well, I feel wonderful. I know you guys must really be having a ball up there tonight.
Well, we got 50 years we're celebrating of WBZ, and we have a bunch of 30-year veterans sitting around here tonight.
We got 2,000 years around the microphones here.
Mel, when did you start in radio? When was your first broadcast?
1939, just shortly after coming out of college. I broadcast in New York with CBS.
Mel, do you remember those wonderful band shows you used to do out in the Pompton Turnpike?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, most all of our staff did those bands. I remember Bert Parks and I particularly.
That's right.
Used to go out and do most of them. We used to alternate doing Benny Goodman and Tommy Dorsey and Glenn Miller. I'll never forget those days. Every once in a while I play some of the recordings we have here of those shows. Great music.
Yeah, they were really great artists. Matter of fact, when they were here in Boston, I worked with all those guys, too. Every one of them. There practically wasn't a big-name band that didn't work Boston one time or another. And we were NBC back in those days, and we used to do 2 or 3 feeds sometimes a night. That's how Vaughn Monroe got involved in the whole thing, too, and out at Silas 10 Acres as a feed to NBC. And he became one of the big bands, too.
Well, I'd like to ask Mel how he got into sports, into baseball particularly, because I remember your first World Series game that you broadcast, Mel, but I hadn't heard you do sports much before that.
Well, as a matter of fact, I didn't intend to do sports. I was in law school, and I'd always wanted to make a letter, but I was not good enough. And like most kids, by the way, you thought you'd like to grow up to be a Major League Baseball player. But anyway, when I got to college, I just wasn't big enough to make the Alabama football team or baseball team or anything else. It wasn't until I got to law school I started really filling out, you know. So I played intramural sports and was manager of varsity sports, wrote sports for the school paper and handled the public address system at basketball games, at football games. And all of a sudden they needed an announcer. In those days, announcers were not as plentiful as they are today. And very frantically, they were searching around for somebody, and among the people they asked was the head football coach at Alabama, then Frank Thomas, who had gone to Notre Dame, and who coached Bear Bryant, the current head coach at Alabama, Coach Don Hudson, had some great teams, and he gave my name because he thought handling a public address system was tantamount to broadcasting. And I went up and sat down to the football game, my first broadcast, and he didn't even know you had to have spotters in football. And I seemed to be getting along all right because I knew the university's team by sight. And I had sense enough to learn the names to go with the jersey numbers of the opposing team. Till somewhere about the middle of the second quarter, Alabama ran a play, and I said, now it's Alabama's ball, a second down, 5 to go on their 35-yard line. And this is a true story. And as they went back in the huddle, I glanced at the scoreboard and had third down, 5 to go. At that time, I always thought the scoreboard had to be correct, but as we've learned since, they can be wrong, too. So while Alabama was getting their next play from the quarterback, I ran a play of my own into the line for no gain. And I got even with it. I got 3rd and 5.
Mel, I always said you were colorful. Did anybody after the play say, how about that?
Well, that's a very common expression. All the kids would use it, and of course I'm sure they do all over the United States. I don't know how that ever became popularized, let us say, on our broadcast, but I tried to put my finger on it, and as close as I could come was 1949, when the Yanks and the Red Sox were fighting for the pennant. Those were some great years and then some great teams, as you know. DiMaggio had missed the first 65 games of the year. he hadn't played since the previous September. He had heel trouble. And without taking any practice or anything, he walked up to Casey Stengel. It was Stengel's first year with the Yankees. And we were coming into Boston. And he suddenly said to Casey, he said, if it's all right with you, Skipper, he said, I'll go in the lineup Tuesday night, which was the first game. Well, you know, the first time at bat, he lined a single to left center. And now, everybody's attention was on DiMaggio, of course. His not having played since the previous year and his sudden decision to jump into the middle of a season practically and play. And I must have hollered, how about that? 'Cause, you know, you were surprised that a guy would get a base hit after having missed most of the year. Well, he hit a home run before the ball game was over. He hit something like 3 home runs before the series was over. He drove in 9 runs and led the team to a sweep of the 3 games. And undoubtedly, every time he got a hit, I must have said, how about that? You know, every time he did it. And I suppose the situation was just right, like you plant a seed and get enough sunshine and rain, it'll sprout. That's about the only place that I can kind of finger it, because I didn't deliberately use it. It was just a natural expression.
Mel, who are some of the sports people you worked with in broadcasting?
That broadcast?
Some of the broadcasters, yes, you worked with.
Well, the late Russ Hodges. Russ came in and worked with me for 3 years when I came out of the Army. And then he went over and became chief announcer for the Giants. Kurt Gowdy came in to work with me from Oklahoma City and worked for something like 3 years before he went up to Boston to do the Red Sox games, and before he reached his current eminent position. We had a fellow named Gleason who became top guy with the Mutual Network. We even had a fellow that was a vaudevillian, but knew baseball really well and was a personal friend of Bill Dickey and was from the same state, Arkansas. And he eventually went out to Hollywood and became a good character actor. And his name is J.C. Flippin, and he recently passed away.
J.C. Flippin, if I remember, used to do some local New York radio. Didn't he do the amateur hour and things like that for a while?
Yes, he used to do a lot of things.
Right. Mel, if you were to pick out one particular ball game or one World Series or one of the most memorable occasions, which one would that be?
Well, it'd be pretty hard to pick out one, naturally, Larson's perfect game. But I think for the most gripping and sustained period of time, it would have to be 1949 when the Red Sox came into Yankee Stadium, leading by 1 game. They had a 4-0 lead in the ball game, and Bertie Tebbetts hollered over to Phil Rizzuto, who was playing short. Looks like we'll be able to play our batting practice pitcher against you guys tomorrow. Well, before the game was over, the Yankees battled back, tied the score in the 8th inning. Finally, Johnny Lindell hit a home run, and the Yankees won the game 5-4, and that threw the pennant race into a deadlock. And on Sunday came this great pitching duo between Ellis Kinder and Vic Raschi. The Yankees got a run in the 1st inning. And then in the 8th inning, they had to pinch hit for Kinder. Henrik hit a home run, and Jerry Coleman hit a little bloop double between Dorr and Zarilla. And 3 men scored on that, believe it or not. And then the Red Sox scored 3 runs in the 9th inning, and the Yankees wound up finally wound up winning 5-3, and thus won the pennant.
There was a lot of sadness in Boston that night.
Well, I guess it was.
We're still crying.
But you know, the ball players, sure, they're happy and all that, but they have a feeling for the other guy. The Yankees and the Red Sox, believe it or not, were great rivals, but at the same time, they had such great respect for one another. They were the same type guy, pretty much. And after ball games, we'd go out and have dinner together and talk about the games. We were great friends, and the players were. But, you know, once it was time to play ball, they were out there earning their bread and butter. But Boston was like a second home to us.
Matter of fact, Mel, you worked the Fenway Park here many times, didn't you, over the years? How'd you like it? How to compare with... we talked about it in a little bandbox here, but how to compare with for working facilities with other.
Well, it's an oddball-shaped park naturally because of that so-called green monster in left field. There are a lot of short foul lines in Major League ballparks, but you don't hit too many home runs down a foul line. Most of them will turn foul. But in Fenway Park, that high fence goes pretty much straight across. And I've seen fellows hit balls that I thought, you know, as it left the bat, your immediate reaction was, boy, that ball is going to go out of sight. But it would hit the wall, and the outfielder would simply turn around, play it back, and fire it into second, hold it to a single. On the other hand, I've seen a fellow hit a little pop fly to left field and hit the screen, be a home run. But right field was extremely deep, although it does curve around by the foul pole, as you know, and is short at that point. But for the most part, out in the bullpen area at Fenway, it's really deep out there. And a guy like Ted Williams really had to poke one to get it in there.
Mel, outside of baseball, what are some of the other occasions that you remember?
I remember one Rose Bowl game I did. I had the privilege of doing 14 of them. Michigan State was playing UCLA, and we had 17 seconds left to go in the game. The score was tied 14-all. Michigan State was the favorite. A fellow by the name of Planutis, their fullback, had missed a couple of field goals that day. And all of a sudden, here is Michigan State lining up for a field goal try. And even the Michigan State public relations man downstairs, we learned later, had announced to the press box, you know, that it was Planutis attempting the field goal. But I took a look and I see this tall, lanky guy, and I knew it wasn't Planutis. But he was at an angle that none of the spotter nor myself could see his number until suddenly he turned slightly to his left to adjust to a little bit. Just as he swung his foot, and I saw the number 89. And he kicked the ball. He had to wear glasses. He wore contact lenses in football games, of course. But he couldn't see so well, so that he had to turn around and look at the referee standing behind him to see whether the referee's arms went up or not to determine whether or not his kick was good. And it was Dave Kaiser. He kicked the field goal, and Michigan State won 17-14, and there were only 7 seconds left in the game when he kicked it. To me, that was a tremendously exciting ball game.
Mel, I think when I was I was a Brooklyn Dodger fan, by the way, during the days when you were with the Yankees. A little earlier this week, we spoke to Red Barber, which was my great pleasure.
Yeah.
I asked him, my first words to him were 3 words, Van Lingle Mungo.
Yeah.
And he knew exactly where he was, what place, and knew all the details, as you know all the details of things that you've seen in your lifetime. But I think you were the first of the announcers who was accused of in New York of being so pro-Yankees. It was ridiculous. Weren't you always accused of being much too partisan?
Well, this was because the Yankees had won so often. Let me explain.
I'm talking about in the World Series, Mal. I mean, when the money was up.
Well, let me put it this way. I would do college football games. I would do pro games as well. But I say college particularly because you do Missouri Air Force, let us say, or Washington and Texas, teams that you'd see only once every 5 years or maybe once every 10 years or something of that kind. You'd still get the same fan reaction because fans react in sports emotionally. And those whose teams lose, they can't stand you. But those whose teams win, they like you. And that's pretty much the size of it. In baseball, where you are working with one team all year long, is a natural loyalty to the team, just like anybody working for any company. But that doesn't mean that I didn't refuse and did so many times. For example, Ted Williams would be coming up to bat, let us say, the Yankee Stadium, and a lot of fans would start booing, like you like to boo a lot of stars. And I'd always say, I can't understand why fans boo a great hitter like Ted Williams. The main thing is you would tell the truth. The truth can hurt very badly, and so can it hurt very badly in sports.
Mel, I think one thing should be pointed out, and that is that you really taught listeners a lot about baseball. You really were the missionary man in there, explaining what was really going on when they watched a game. You really helped out enormously in that. That was your great contribution to me.
But you know, one of the reasons is just like, going to school, you had to study. We didn't just go out and do a ball game. I'd read books about baseball history, about guys that I'd always heard about, but, never got to see play. And I would talk to some of the old-timers who had seen them play or who played against them. And you'd talk to a fellow, say, like Casey Stengel, and somebody would ask Casey, for example, after a game, why didn't you have so-and-so bunt in the ninth inning? And Casey's answer was very simple. He says, because he can't bunt. Well, his philosophy was great. Let's say that the number 2 man on his team got on base. And the next guy didn't bunt, and they wound up losing the game in a one-run situation. He explained it away very simply. He said, if my number 2 man gets on base, then I have Mantle, who's batting third bunt. They're going to purposely walk Maris. So they jump right away from number 2 to number 5 in my batting order. And so I'm giving away my power to the opposing team. It was his theory to play his power against your weakness and his weakness against your power. Now, for example, he said when you bunt, if you're playing Baltimore, don't bunt on Brooks Robinson. He's death on bunts. So we'll fake it and then put on a hit-and-run play. And he had it down very simple. And the main thing is just like Ted, if I can go back to Williams for a moment, and I consider him one of my greatest friends. He taught me a lot about baseball, about how to watch things that hitters did, and this is what he would do, of course. You watch them. You watch little changes, and they can tip you off. Same way in football. I would do a bowl game, let's say, or a regular season game, and the coach would say, you watch this quarterback's feet. Now, when he comes up to the line, if they stay pretty much even, it'll be a handoff on a running play. Motion is the thing that you watch in the line, If the guards pull or tackles pull, the play's going to move to the side that they're pulling. It may be a reverse, and the ball carry come back the other way. But he said, watch this quarterback's feet. Said if his right foot is pulled back just a little bit, he's going to roll out. Now, the quarterback didn't know that, but they did because they'd watched films of games that this fellow had played in, and they'd scouted him. And so there were always these little tip-offs that helped you, and by talking baseball or football or basketball with the guys who played it, they not only told you why they did things, but why they did certain things against certain players and why certain players did certain things against them. And so this way, while you had a basic knowledge of the game, you had an extra knowledge of it by the stars themselves telling you these extra bits, these touches that made it possible for you to teach people, because you were taught by them. And this is why I say that I think broadcasting was better a few years ago than it is today. In other words, we could set up possibilities of plays that would take place, and a fan could sit back and watch and see which of those plays would take place on his TV, instead of waiting till the play is over and then have somebody come in and try to explain it when 22 men were in action, and there's nobody in the world that can remember all that.
Well, they're so busy doing instant replays, Mel, that they don't have too much time to do all of that.
I think once in a while an instant replay is excellent, but I think it's much more fun to sit back and, for example, Murray Warmoth, the head coach at Minnesota, he explained his defensive philosophy to me, which I was able to do ahead of time to the people listening in terms of a funnel. He said, if you think of a funnel, it's got a wide mouth, and the mouth of the funnel is my line when I'm on defense. And he says, I try to turn every play into the mouth of the funnel so it goes down into the neck of the funnel. And then I've got the play squeezed. And so that was his philosophy. Now, the team that played him tried to turn his ends with speed. If you could do that, then you would force Minnesota to spread its line a little bit more. And as they had to spread their line, then you could run your fullback up the middle on them. But otherwise, you couldn't do that.
Mel, word has it that you've been nominated and elected to the Broadcasters Hall of Fame. Is that true?
Yes. The National Sports Writers and Broadcasters Association has a Hall of Fame, just like the players. And I was very honored, naturally, and that's putting it mildly, to receive word that I had been elected to Broadcasters Hall of Fame following two men that were, really great. One from NBC and the other from CBS, and that last one was Ted Husing. It was Graham McNamee who was first selected, and then Ted Husing, and I'll be third. And the induction ceremonies will take place next March.
Well, that's sensational. We're glad. That's pretty swift company you're in, by the way, Graham McNamee and Ted Husing.
It really is.
Mel, what are you doing today?
Well, my brother and I are in business. We have a bottling franchise in southern Connecticut, right up to the New York line. And at the same time, I keep my feet wet by doing some TV and radio. I'm doing a lot of TV right now for a beer company. And
you can't get away. You can't get away from the bottles, huh, Mel? I say you're doing a lot of beer broadcasting and distributing bottles.
Yeah.
How about those cigars, Mel?
Well, might get back to them too. You never know.
Can we be
you mean the one with the bird on it?
That's the fella.
Yeah.
We've been looking forward to anything in the very near future, looking out for you? Any radio or television assignment that we might...
Well, there have been opportunities. For example, when Joe DiMaggio went to Oakland for 2 years, when Finley first took his team out there, Mr. Finley asked me to go out there as his broadcaster. And I could have signed with them. But he wanted me to be out there 12 months a year, and I thought that at this stage of my life, after having been in the, metropolitan area, the center of communications, I just didn't want to leave here. I had a chance to go to other places. In fact, I did some Braves games. I'd leave New York and fly out to wherever they were. They never did the whole season. They'd do, say, 2/3 of the season. I did some Cleveland games on TV. They only did 1/3 of their season on TV. I'd fly out wherever they were, did their games, come back to New York. And so I've been kept busy that way, and I've done some games for NBC. They do 2 every Saturday, the regular game and the so-called backup game, and I've done some of those, and I've done a lot of work for NBC in the last few years where I haven't had to travel too much. You get to the point, boy, where it gets pretty tiresome with these suitcases and eating dinner about 1 o'clock in the morning, a lot of places. I never will forget, we left Kansas City to go to Minneapolis after the series was over. And it wasn't until 5 o'clock in the morning that our luggage got there, and we had our own chartered plane. And, this kind of living is no good for you.
Yeah, I asked Red Barber the same question. He said he'd had it with that sort of thing, and he's kind of settled in Florida and likes it, and writing books and doing local broadcasts, and that's how he likes it.
Well, listen, here you'd have some friends, and they'd be working, and you'd be home doing whatever you had to do, getting ready for a night game. Then you'd go into the ballpark. Your friends would then be coming home. So you'd never even get to see them when you were home, and suddenly your social life began to develop more on the road, even though that is in the overall, because you'd be in one town 3 days, another town 3 days, a little bit here and there. But you are not living a normal life. And you find fellows coming up after about their second or third year in the majors. They suddenly realize that they're not leading a normal life.
Well, Mel, I don't think anybody in radio and television leads a normal life, do you?
Not even when they get to stay home all the time.
That's exactly what I meant.
Wish you could see us all, Mel.
Mel, thank you very much for helping us celebrate WBZ's 50th anniversary. How about that? And
well, sir, I want to congratulate you and all the staff and everybody there on your 50th anniversary. And I would hope that the good Lord would make it possible for us to be around 50 more years and see the great progress that our industry is making.
Mel, thank you, and congratulations on your election, too, to the Sports Broadcasters Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much.
Good night, Mel.
Good night, Jerry. And I sure appreciate it. And say hello to everybody for me.
Will do.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Mel Allen, ladies and gentlemen. Fantastic performer, as you can hear. Remembers every little thing that happened during the games, including how many inches they were from the
Fly ball, center field.
Yes, sir. Okay, we'll return in a moment.
The great trains of Europe. The Mistral to Nice. The Rapido from Rome to Venice. The Mozart to Vienna. The Lorelei to Lucerne. The great trains, a first-class way to see Europe on a Qantas tour. See Europe on a Qantas Fly and Rail tour from From New York, as low as $695. For your jet economy round trip, a first-class Eurail pass for 28 days, bed and breakfast at historic inns and hotels in 13 countries. See your travel agent and fly Qantas.
Fly Qantas. Qantas treats you better all around. Fly to Europe on a plane, then go see it all by train. Qantas treats you better all around.
We're going to take a short intermission for news and weather. Street Stewart is here, Jerry Howard, Carl DeSuze, Arch McDonald, Art Gardner, Horace Ralph, and yours truly, Sam Krilby's. And not well known around Boston, but well known in my hometown of Fire Hydrant, Iowa. We're going to take that short break, so stand by, and then we'll return with Robert Q. Lewis and others during the course of the night.
When I get tired of T-shirts and dungarees and that whole funky scene, I need something more elegant, and that's when I need Down with Louise, a great new shop for elegant clothes. Down with Louise, 'cause elegance is the way it's going, and the people at Louis have a way of knowing how a great look can cost less. It's Down with Louis.
Down with Louis, the new boutique for men at Louis' lower level. Incredible elegance at incredibly reasonable prices. It's where it's at and where it's going. And where it's at is 470 Boylston Street, Boston.
Down with Louis, 'cause elegance is the way it's going. Down with Louis, down with Louis, down with Louis.
Did you know that Wonderland is open all through September, right up to October the 4th? That means there's plenty of dog racing excitement left for you to enjoy, so why not go Wonderland tomorrow night?
Hi, this is Larry Glick, and I'll be seeing you in 2 hours on Radio 103.
The Spirit of New England, WBZ, and WBZ-FM Boston, Group W, Westinghouse Broadcasting.
It's 53 degrees in Boston, near tonight's expected low. I'm Maurice Lewis reporting at 10 o'clock, WBZ News. California police are holding a suspect in the shooting deaths of 3 campers and the wounding of a 4th in the Sierra Nevada wilderness. The site is 75 miles from where 2 persons were killed with sickles last July. The shootings occurred at a campsite north of a tiny former gold rush town in the California motherlode country. Investigators are poking the ruins of the Framingham Motor Parts Company this hour. The Framingham building was dealt an estimated $500,000 damage by a 2-alarm fire today. The blaze broke out in a storeroom of the 1-story structure. 20 employees were inside, but all reached safety unharmed. The building and its contents have been described as a total loss. Belgium's parliament will fall by the wayside under an announcement made tonight by Premier Gaston Eskens. In what he called the interest of the country, Eskens said that parliament would be dissolved and that general elections would take place November 7th. Increasing difficulties came to an outright split earlier this week between the ruling coalition of socialists and Christian Democrats. RWBZ News Time, 4 minutes after 10.
Here's a way to refresh your taste.
Refresh your taste. Chew Wrigley Spearmint Gum. Refresh your taste. For flavor, it's the one. The flavor's fresh and lively too. It cools your mouth, it's great to chew. Refresh your taste. Chew Wrigley Spearmint Gum.
You know, when you come right down to it, that's what millions of people like about Wrigley Spearmint Gum. Wrigley Spearmint's fresh, lively flavor really does refresh your taste.
Delicious and long-lasting too. Enjoy it daily, millions do. Refresh your taste. Chew Wrigley Spearmint Gum.
American bombers blazed inside North Vietnam for the 4th consecutive day, blasting anti-aircraft batteries that reportedly fired on them. The U.S. command in Saigon said the 2 bombers were on a mission over the Ho Chi Minh Trail in eastern Laos when they were fired on. A pair of secondary explosions resulted from the attack, according to the command, indicating that the ammunition site was hit. New York state officials, including Governor Nelson Rockefeller, have been ordered to show cause why they should not be barred from questioning inmates about the bloody riot at Attica State Prison. U.S. District Judge John Curtin acted after a show cause order was sought by a group of lawyers representing many of the 1,200 remaining inmates at Attica. At the same time, a deputy State Attorney General probing the rebellion said that he requested state officials to refrain from inmate interrogations without assurances that all constitutional prerequisites had been fulfilled.